Well, a warm welcome along to this week's Mark Langdon's Bets Club in association with freesupertips.com, your home for daily football hackers and bet builders. We'll be looking ahead to this week's Premier League fixtures, giving you all the best tips and predictions. And Aaron Ashley will be with us a little bit later as well to look ahead to the EFL action this weekend. Well, after air traffic control problems, it means that Jack Reeve is ruled out of today's Bets Club. So Warren Ashurst with you again. And Mark Langdon is back from his holidays. Firstly, Mark, are we feeling refreshed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm nicely browned from the sun. 2 weeks on just sitting around the pool. But I've been following Jack's epic trip back to Split on his on his Instagram and on his Twitter. He had to go from Split to Zagreb by coach. Then he was on a train to Stuttgart that also had a bus replacement for part of it. Then he had to get another train from Stuttgart to Munich. Then an overnighter from Munich to Paris, I think it was. And then he's sort of probably on the Eurostar about now back to London. I reckon the hardest part of that trip is going to be the bit from London home to his beloved Great Yarmouth. So well done to Jack for trying to make it in time, but he'd been beaten by the transfer deadline, and quite apt, I suppose, given that we've only got 1 day left of that.
That journey sounds like trying to make it to Karabag for a Champions League qualifier. We'll start off before we look ahead to the weekend, Mark, with some of the main talking points this week. Let's start firstly with the EFL Cup results. Probably the standout, bearing in mind how things have been going recently. Tottenham being knocked out by Fulham on penalties. Anything else catch your eye amongst those EFL fixtures?
Well, no, I think there probably were two, weren't there? The first was Spurs getting knocked out. A lot of anger in the fan base over the 9 changes. Kind of just stops that Postecoglou momentum, really, that was building. The beloved Postecoglou sort of 3 games in, and then he gets into a situation where he's out of the League Cup before they've even reached September. And then in terms of the kind of, I suppose, the next ones with Chelsea going behind to AFC Wimbledon. I wondered if the shock was on there, but it wasn't to be. And Everton, I mean, when they went 1-0 down to Doncaster Rovers, there would have been, mass panic, I'm imagining, for the blue half of Merseyside. The fact that they managed to get the win was much needed, because what you don't want after starting the Premier League the way they have is to go out of the the League Cup to the team that's currently bottom of the entire Football League. So the fact that the new signing Beto scored was a positive for Everton. And I don't like to. I know there's a lot of people seem to take great pleasure in Everton struggling. I couldn't care really either way, but I just think for their supporters, they have been long suffering. Had they gone out to Doncaster, it would have been an even sort of a new low for them. And then just in terms of the draw, I mean, there's hope for everybody, isn't there? Because the fact that Man City just go, oh well, they'll probably win this competition. The fact they're away to Newcastle in the next round does make it more interesting, I think, for everybody left in it. If City can get knocked out early, it really does open it up. So well done to some of the lower league teams that are still in there. And from a Spurs fan's point of view, just another trophy disappearing. But we're used to it by now.
Well, of course, it is transfer deadline approaching as well, and quite a few clubs trying to do last-minute business as things stand. One of the really interesting potential deals, Mark, is Cole Palmer leaving Manchester City to join Chelsea. It's almost just come out of the blue, this.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have said sort of this time last week, how much was Cole Palmer worth? I don't think I've been able to have given you a ballpark figure to within about 20 million, to be honest, because, he was somebody that, it's just hard to know how good he is, isn't it? We haven't seen anything of him. I thought Chelsea were being linked with Smith Rowe as well, so they clearly wanted sort of another, a young English talent in there. I would just trust Man City's judgment on Cole Palmer, in that if they thought he was good enough, they wouldn't have sold him. And the fact that they're prepared to sell him suggests that they don't think he's going to make it at Manchester City. And when I look at that Chelsea team, I don't see a natural position for him in there once everybody's fit. It wouldn't have been the player I would have sort of said, right, that's what Chelsea need. I still feel like a a sort of proper, in inverted commas, centre forward would have been the way to go, because they've got a lot of these wide players. If that's what Cole Palmer is, like I said, I haven't seen enough of him to really know. And you wouldn't normally say that about somebody that's about to go for 45 million, would you? That you don't know how good he is because you haven't seen him. But when I have seen him, it's been in wider positions. And, if Chelsea are well stocked anywhere, it's in the wide positions. Maybe he becomes a number 10, but I thought that's where Nkunku was going to play. So, not the first time I've sort of left scratching my head over a Chelsea transfer. I would say, if I was betting on who's getting the better out of the deal, I would make City favourites.
Well, Cole Palmer might be leaving City, but a player might well be coming in to replace him, and that's Matheus Nunes of Wolves. I mean, this has been rumbling on for a couple of weeks. Nunes decided not to train with Wolves this week in order to try and force a move, and it looks like he's going to get his way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to see players going on strike. All I would say about that is that you don't know what he was promised when he signed for Wolves. There were rumours that, he had, whether it was in his contract or one of those Daniel Levy gentleman's agreements on he could join a sort of Champions League club if one came in for him. You can understand why he'd want to go, and play for City. Interesting, I think, the dynamic really in what City are trying to do with their midfielders, because Kovacic would be another one. And Nunez is also one that can carry the ball, maybe a bit better than, say, what the kind of Gundogan did. And even what De Bruyne, a brilliant passer of the ball, doesn't, and at the age that he is now, he's not going to get any better at carrying the ball. So maybe a change in dynamic there in terms of, what City want from their midfielders. All I would say about Nunez is that he's been really hyped up. And I don't know. I think the hype's been bigger than kind of what I've actually seen on the pitch from him since he arrived in England. There's clearly potential there, and if anybody can get it out of him, it will be Pep Guardiola. But yeah, I don't think it's a terrible deal for Wolves. This, it really should enable them to reinforce other areas of the squad that need patching up after the sales and departures. And I think this feels like a decent deal all round. City have got a player that they wanted, and I think Wolves have got a really fair fee for him.
And finally, before we move on to the weekend's action, potentially the coup of the transfer window being Ansu Fati potentially joining Brighton on a season-long loan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of season-long loans for young players, because I just think as Brighton in this instance, you're kind of developing him for somebody else. But, with Cisco injured, they wanted another creative, sort of dynamic player in there. If Ansu Fati gets back to the levels he showed before his knee injuries, then, Brighton have got another fantastic footballer on their books, at least for, this season. The caveat to it, and because it's a loan, it doesn't matter quite as much. But he hasn't been the same player since he's had those knee injuries. So I just hope for his sake he can get back to those levels. And if he does, Brighton have got an absolute blockbuster on their hands for this season ahead. I suppose I just have my doubts as to whether he can sort of sustain it over a season, because he just hasn't been able to. But the talent was clearly there previously. So that playing for De Zerbi is always fun. So let's hope we get to see the real Ansu Fati.
And just one quick last point, Mark, as well, about the transfer window and the impact that it has also from a betting perspective as well. I mean, are you a fan of the transfer window going to the start of September, end of August, or would you rather it end before the season starts?
Well, I just think that too many seasons start at different times, don't they, in Europe? So, I mean, to what season are you starting it? You're starting it at the Premier League, or are you going to start it in Serie A? That's maybe 2 weeks later. And then you're giving other sort of nations an advantage. I think that the end of August is fine, actually. I know I'm in the minority there that believe that. But, it gives you a chance to assess your team maybe over the first couple of matches as well. And you don't need to leave your business until late. And in fact, it's only really the desperate teams that are doing it. And I do think this is a problem more in the Premier League because of the amount of money that everybody's got. I don't see loads of scrambling around in other countries, with, everybody trying to buy 3 or 4 players on the last day. You get a lot of people now, your Fabrizio Romanos of this world that are kind of, hyping up the transfer window. my advice is to kind of switch off from it all, wait until the signings are done, and then assess them. And I think that it's too difficult in kind of in a global market to say, well, you've got to finish when the season starts, because too many of them start at different times.
Yeah, it's certainly something the managers have been talking plenty about, and they'll be talking plenty about the weekend action as well over the next few days, and we'll take a look at that next. Let's start then with the big Premier League match of the weekend. Over the years, we've seen some classic Arsenal versus Man United encounters. They'll meet again at this time at the Emirates on Sunday with a 4:30 kickoff. Arsenal 4-5, Manchester United 16-5, and it's 3-2 on the draw. Let's start with Arsenal, Mark. They've made sloppy starts, I think it's fair to say, of late. 3 times they've conceded in the first minute in the last 9 home games. That's something that will probably worry Mikel Arteta going into this game.
Yeah, you just wonder what he says in the in the dressing room before a game. I imagine it's keep it tight, nothing silly, and then Saka. It was a really funny goal against Fulham. Saka gives the ball away. Ramsdale kind of falls over, doesn't know where he is. And it kind of, last season people were saying it was because they were a bit nervy, and that's what it was. I don't know. You think it's probably just one of those things, but clearly it's happened sort of too frequently. I mean, it's such a rare statistic. I would just wonder whether they might just get the kickoff and just whack it up the pitch. We're using the Arteta way, but just get yourself played into the match. I think that Arsenal just defensively need to sharpen up. We weren't saying this sort of at the start of last season, and they've kind of fallen into the bad old habits, really. Particularly at the Emirates, and they do like to play an enterprising football, and they do take risks, which is going to leave them vulnerable at times. But if you're a team that wants to win the league, and that's the kind of bracket you have to put Arsenal in after last season, you can't keep giving teams starts, because you're just making it too difficult for to win enough matches. You're having to score 2 and 3 goals to win games, and sometimes you just need to be able to get the old dirty 1-0s, a bit like how Arsenal did in the George Graham era. So I think that it's something that Arteta will look to eradicate, really. And if that does mean playing slightly more basic, just in those first moments to get yourself into the match, then that's just what you have to do. But yeah, it's not good enough really from Arsenal to keep giving opponents a 1-goal start.
I mean, I covered the game between Arsenal and Fulham last week, and I have to say I'd heard quite a few Arsenal fans saying about being worried about players being played out of position, and maybe them trying to be almost too clever with the way that they're playing. And I felt that was possibly the case, that they're asking players to play out of position. Thomas Partey at right back is a prime example of that. And I think that is a genuine concern for Arsenal fans, Mark, at this early stage of the season, that maybe they're trying to be, you could argue, too like Manchester City and trying to, put square pegs in round holes, maybe.
Yeah, I know that there's been a criticism or kind of a mocking of Arteta, isn't there? That he is a mini Pep, and he just he wants to copy everything that Pep Guardiola does. I suppose what you might say from Arsenal's point of view, if you were giving them the benefit of the doubt in this kind of instance, is that they are looking. If you think about it, sometimes like Man City, when they were last season, they had a number of sloppy results, didn't they? While they were trying to find the right solution, and they eventually found it with John Stones playing in that hybrid role. Second half of the season, they kicked on, but it wasn't without its kind of pains. You had Bernardo Silva at left back for a few matches, and that didn't work out. And he tried Rico Lewis in different positions. And he was trying to to find a better way. And if you always just stick to what you were doing, then you might not get better. And there might be a better way for Arsenal. Now, I agree. I don't think it is with Thomas Partey at right back. Certainly not with Ben White as the sort of centre back there, because I thought Ben White did very well as the right back. So I do understand that the complaints, but if you don't try to get better, then you probably won't get better. So Arteta's just thinking that they've got a smallish squad, and maybe they just need to look at different solutions. I mean, the one that's kind of standing out and getting a lot of stick at the moment is Kai Havertz, and are they trying to kind of bend too much to get Havertz into the team. And there is always the danger of that with a kind of a summer signing, that you end up moving too far away from what had made you successful. And, Xhaka in that left-hand side midfield role advanced did so well for Arsenal last year in terms of covering defensively, winning the ball, high up. And you wouldn't have thought he was difficult to replace. But actually, it's looking like he is at the moment. And I'm sure eventually, Arsenal and Arteta will get it right. I'm just worried because, people have put the boot into Arteta before and he found solutions and he made Arsenal better. So, I'm prepared to kind of just say, well, I'm not going to go all in on him being, a bit bonkers for what he's trying to do now.
There may be a little bit of pressure on Mikel Arteta, but probably not as much as there is on Erik ten Hag at the moment. And it would have been much worse, Mark, but for that comeback against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I mean, look, the two home performances have been shocking, I think. Okay, they've come back against Nottingham Forest, but to find yourself 2-0 down inside, first 10 minutes or even before that, it is shambolic, really. And the fact of where one of the goals has just come straight from Nottingham Forest running through the heart of that Manchester United midfield, and then Onana not covering himself in glory either. And Wolves did exactly the same to them, and Tottenham did after the first half an hour. Tottenham did exactly the same again. And so you're looking at that United team, the balance of it just looks wrong. And Mason Mount was the one getting the early criticism, but he didn't play against Nottingham Forest. It still didn't look right. And then you're wondering if Casemiro, needs a few games to get up to speed, or whether, signing an experienced older player has kind of caught up with him already. I doubt that, because he was very good last season. So I don't think you go from being a top talent, in April to suddenly not being able to play football in August. It doesn't work like that. So I think structurally there are issues with that Manchester United team, that they need to get busy. I think in the final few days of the transfer window, a central midfielder feels like a must. But Manchester United spent an absolute fortune in recent years, and we always say the solution is that they need to buy more players. Ten Hag's getting a fair bit of stick, but last season they finished in the top four. They won the League Cup. They reached the final of the FA Cup. They had a decent enough run in Europe. I mean, I feel like he's done well enough up to this point to not be getting the stick that he's getting. I think it's because he put a lot of faith in Anthony, didn't he? That was his signing, and they went all out to get him this time last year, and that hasn't paid off. And now people are going, well, can you actually work with players that you haven't worked with before? Like, where's the sporting director? Where's the technical director? Where's the long-term strategy here? Should you be having that much influence? And there's maybe a question mark over the how well someone like Anthony has done. But I think he's earned enough in that first season to warrant not putting the boot into him. And they have still got 6 points from a possible 9. So, there are a lot of teams that would be happy enough with 6 points at this stage.
It's a well-used phrase, but when you win and you're not playing well, it may also be a decent sign down the line. With all that under consideration, Arsenal against Manchester United on Sunday, what's your best bet for this clash, Mark?
I'm going to go for Arsenal to win. United have given up 16 shots on target so far. It's too many. I know Arsenal have not been perfect themselves, but that United midfield just allows too much freedom. And then you've got Varane being injured, Luke Shaw injured. It just feels, and Mason Mount as well. So it just feels like a patched up United side at the moment that's still finding the solution to how they want to play. And like I say, while Arsenal have not been perfect, I mean, they can definitely score goals against this United team. And so I'll go for an Arsenal win.
Okay, Mark fancies Arsenal in the big game. Up next, we'll look ahead to the rest of the Premier League fixtures this weekend. Well, let's start off then by looking at Friday's only game, and it takes place at Kenilworth Road. It looks like all of the work that's been done over the summer has seen a nice new stand up here at Luton's home ground, and they'll kick off their home Premier League campaign against an inspired West Ham at the moment, Mark, who are surprising a few people.
They are, yeah, myself included. I'm going to go for a West Ham win. Now, it's a tricky game because it's Luton's first, as you say, in the Premier League at Kenilworth Road. It's going to be a hostile environment. It's going to be a different test for West Ham, who've been able to play on the counter-attack in all 3 of their matches so far. Bournemouth like to push forward. Chelsea had a lot of the ball, and then Brighton had 80% possession, and West Ham, managed to beat, both of those, 2 big guns, really, if you think about Chelsea and Brighton and what they're looking to achieve this season. And I just thought they'd be shorter in the betting. I know that there is Kenilworth Road is going to be just different to anything else in the Premier League. But, West Ham, I feel like they've spent the Declan Rice money okay. It was probably not as quick as what it should have been done, but you got Bowen playing well, Paquetá, Antonio's in one of his good spells. He hits a flat spot during the season usually because he gets absolutely exhausted by the way that he plays. But at the moment, he's running hard, and I just thought there was just more Premier League quality in that West Ham team. And we've seen, Luton have had 2 hard games so far, but they have lost them both and lost them pretty convincingly as well.
It seems daft to say that we're looking at a huge game at the bottom end of the table when you consider it's only going to be the start of September. But Saturday's early kickoff at Bramall Lane does look a massive clash, Mark. Sheffield United against Everton. Yeah,
it does. I'm gonna go for Everton draw no bet, because I actually think that they've played okay in their 2 home matches so far. Obviously the Villa defeat away from home was a bad one, but 2 out of 3 games that they've played well. And I just think that this trip to Bramall Lane is one of the easier games, let's face it, in terms of the Premier League. I mean, Sheffield United have been outshot 70-21 so far in the Premier League. That included that opener at Bramall Lane when Palace had 68% possession against them and won the shots on target count 8-1. Now, you've got Hamer and Archer have come in for Sheffield United since then, so they'll should make a difference for them. And they put up a decent enough fight, I suppose, the Blades at Bramall Lane against City. They're a couple of minutes away from getting an unlikely point, but for most of that game, they didn't look like they were going to get anything from it. And I know Everton are no Man City, but Beto's come in, scored on his debut, so that should give them a bit more firepower. And I just think they're 2 bad teams, but I expect Everton to sort of finish comfortably above Sheffield United this season in terms of points difference come the end of the campaign. And with that in mind, I just thought that they were the more likely winners, even away from home.
There are 4 games kicking off at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Let's start off with Brentford against Bournemouth. Looks like an intriguing game on paper. How do you see this one going, Mark?
I just thought Brentford was short enough here, so I'm going to go for Bournemouth or draw, double chance. Obviously, Brentford have done very well so far this campaign in terms of got the draw against Tottenham, which will probably look a decent point come the end of the season. Won well at Fulham, and then this is the game. It's that Crystal Palace game where they're unable to beat Crystal Palace that just makes me nervous about, do I trust them to beat Bournemouth at a short enough price? And the answer is no. And when I look at Bournemouth, you could say they've had one of the hardest sort of schedules so far. They drew West Ham, then they lost to Spurs and Liverpool. Had some bright spots in both of those matches. And if you have a look at the current league table, all 3 of those teams are in the top 4. Now, that might be because they've played Bournemouth and they've managed to get 3 easy points. But I don't think that it is. I just think that Bournemouth have had a tough start. This is not an easy game either. But, Brentford are a kind of team I like at kind of bigger prices, really. When they're odds-on favourites, they're not for me, really.
I wonder whether Burnley should be slightly concerned with their start, bearing in mind that a lot of people thought they'd be more than comfortable in terms of their Premier League status this season, and they welcome Tottenham on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going to hold my hands up and say I'm in that camp that kind of just thought Burnley would be very much in mid-table, no problem whatsoever, really rate Vincent Kompany, etc., etc. And then I looked at the 11 that went out on the pitch against Aston Villa. I thought, God, that looks really weak. And that I might be doing a disservice because some players there that I certainly don't know as much about them as what I would. I don't know their opponents, Tottenham, for example. But it didn't look a great team to me. And they're 7-2 for relegation, which I just thought was quite an interesting price, given that they've lost 2 home games, and I don't read too much into that because they were difficult games against City and Aston Villa. They've conceded 3 goals in both of them. And it was just the fact that the team doesn't look to have that many great players in it. Now, maybe, the young players, and they're going to develop, and Vincent Kompany's a great coach and he'll get the most out of them. But yeah, it didn't look like an amazing side to me.
We expected better, I suppose, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so. And defensively against Aston Villa, there was some, let's just say there were some naive moments in there. And I'm going to go for Tottenham to win. They made a lot of changes against Fulham, so this is more like the first team. Spurs have scored 2 goals in all 3 of their games. Maddison absolutely running the show. And I just wonder whether Burnley have got that nous to shut him down. And if they haven't, he'll pick the passes all day long like he did against Bournemouth. And yeah, this is a sort of similar game, isn't it, really? And Tottenham were good enough to win at Bournemouth. And I think they'll probably be good enough to win at Burnley as well.
Nottingham Forest have had arguably the toughest start to the season in terms of away games. At Arsenal on the opening weekend, they then lost at Manchester United, and now they've got Chelsea on Saturday.
Yeah, and they've got some other hard away games coming up as well. So it is a rough start for Steve Cooper. I'm going to go for Chelsea to win and under 3.5 goals. I know that Forest were involved in that ding-dong Old Trafford last week, but it was a bit of a freak nature to the way that they got themselves 2 goals in front. Now, one year's been in a real hot streak, and he's somebody that Chelsea will have to look after. But I would expect them to be able to do that. And I think that Chelsea, one of them teams actually that have got, maybe feel like they should have had more points on the board already. They beat Luton easily enough. After the first sort of 20 minutes when they weren't amazing against Liverpool, they really grew into that game and were probably the more likely winners. And against West Ham, if they score the penalty, they might even go on and win that game. So I'm going to go for Chelsea to win. Whether they've got the firepower to absolutely blow Forest away, I'm not so sure. So Chelsea to win and under 3.5 goals.
Talk about being blown away. Manchester City at home to Fulham on the 4th and final 3 o'clock kickoff. We were expecting a heavy success for the home team.
Comfortable, I suppose, rather than wide margin. I just think that City can win the game easily enough. But I'm going to take the route of City to win and under 4.5 goals. It's the kind of game where you can see Fulham being competitive. They usually are in this type of fixture, even against Man City. Last season that they lost by the odd goal on a couple of occasions. So one thing to just note here, though, is Paulinho, the hugely influential midfielder for Fulham, is being linked with Bayern Munich. So if he doesn't play, if he's sold by then, that would be a savage blow for Fulham, for their entire campaign. So, that would be, definitely one to look out for over the next 2 days. As it stands, Man City to win and under 4.5 goals. And I don't think, even if Paulinho was to leave, I don't think it would change my mind on what I think is a very fair price about that outcome.
His late game at 5:30 is at the Amex Stadium, and it promises to be a real entertaining encounter as Brighton take on Newcastle. How do you see this one going, Mark?
I'm going to go for a Brighton win. It's nothing negative about Newcastle. Genuinely think these are 2 good sides. And I wouldn't be that bothered by the fact that Newcastle lost to 10-man Liverpool, because for most of that game, looked like they were going to win. And if Alisson doesn't pull off the amazing save, the Barnes probably should have squared it to Wilson, wasn't it? And you're suddenly looking at Newcastle having won that match, and the other game they lost was away to Man City. So nothing in that. But I just genuinely think that Brighton are a really good team, and with home advantage, I think they should be clear favourites, to win this game. And bookmakers are struggling to find a favourite. Don't be I'm not bothered really by the fact that Brighton got beat by West Ham, because we saw that last year against Everton. Occasionally, the way that Brighton play, all-out attack, throwing men forward, they will get done on the counter-attack by teams. It's just one of them things that happens to a De Zerbi side. But the sort of flip side of that is that they win a lot of matches because they take so many risks. And so I just think at the prices, I'd rather be with Brighton, I think.
We've already talked about, of course, Arsenal, Manchester United on Sunday, but there are 2 other Premier League games on Sunday, both kicking off at 2 o'clock. Possibly more surprisingly is the fact that Liverpool Aston Villa is not actually live on TV. The live selection is at Selhurst Park, Mark, Crystal Palace against Wolves.
Oh, I mean, this is, yeah, well, what on earth are the TV companies doing to us? I mean, one game, I mean, the over 2.5 goals at Anfield is like 4-9. It's definitely not 4-9 at Selhurst Park. So, in terms of a
No.
match bet, in which game's more likely to have goals, I know which one it is. But in terms of the bet, I'm going to go for a Wolves or draw double chance here. Just don't think Palace have got that much up front. Zaha, we've spoken about the fact he's gone, Elise's injured. Do you really fancy them at around even money to win sort of enough Premier League football matches? I don't. Wolves, I sort of got more negative as the transfer window went on with Wolves. And I did just wonder if they'd lost too many players. Their performances actually have been okay. I mean, never mind, unlucky to lose at Old Trafford. I mean, they probably should have won at Old Trafford. They did win at Everton, slightly smash and grab, but unexpected goals. There wasn't much in it. And then the game against Brighton, I was in Spain at the time. I actually watched the full 90 minutes of that match. I'm sure my wife loved the fact that I just disappeared in the middle of a sort of Saturday afternoon to go and do that. But I did go and watch it, and definitely wasn't as comfortable for Brighton as what the eventual scoreline came up with. And they played some brilliant football, Brighton, at times. But Wolves had their moments in that game. And yeah, I was even looking at Wolves to win the game. And then I was just, well, where are their goals going to come from? So I think the draw's a big runner. So I'm going to go for Wolves or draw double chance.
And you've already hinted that there could be goals or likely to be goals at Anfield between Liverpool and Villa. Is that the way you're going to go?
Well, I do think there'll be goals, but I'm not going to sort of put up over 2.5 at 4-9. I'm going to put up a much bigger price, and that's Aston Villa to win at Anfield. Van Dijk suspended, Konate a major doubt. I mean, that's a lot for Liverpool to overcome, particularly for a team that hasn't been fantastic defensively anyway this season. I take on board Anfield, tough place to go. Not many sides are going to win there this season. Not many teams have won there in recent seasons either. So, this is a difficult game for Aston Villa, but they're a capable team, as they showed against Burnley. Really strong up front. You've got big threats. Obviously, Diaby's been added to that over the summer as well. So a real couple of counter-attacking threats. They usually defend reasonably well. And I actually think against Newcastle, that was on the opening weekend of the season, wasn't it? That the final score was harsh on them in that game. They had their moments in that match. And I think the Tyrone Mings injury definitely unsettled Aston Villa. I wouldn't be surprised if Aston Villa won this game. You're a Liverpool fan, Warren. I mean, are you a bit nervous?
Yeah, I think you pointed out that the reason to be nervous with the centre-backs missing. I think when Konate and Van Dijk are fit and playing well, then that is a lot different equation in terms of Aston Villa's front line than Matip and Gomez, say, as two centre-backs. So I think that will be a concern. And plus, I have to say, I've been impressed by Villa so far. I think they've looked, not only this season, but also towards the end of last season with Unai Emery, like they're a team that are going places.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be amazed, would you? I know a lot of people like play this last man standing game where you've got to pick a different team to win every week. I mean, Liverpool's not a team I'd be putting in this week if I was. Well, I am. I'm helping my mum in one of those competitions. She's in one, and we've already put Liverpool in already. But if Liverpool were unavailable, they definitely wouldn't be going in this week. I think it's a tricky game.
That's Mark's thoughts then on all of the Premier League games over the weekend. Up next, Aaron Ashley will be joining us to discuss all things EFL.
If you want some free football bets this season, we've got you covered. Simply head to racingpost.com/free bets, and there you'll find over £200 worth of them for you to use this season. That's racingpost.com/free bets.
Well, as promised, we're joined now by Aaron Ashley to look ahead to the EFL this weekend. And before we get your tips, Aaron, we've been looking at, of course, a team in focus over the last few weeks since the new season has started. And living in Northampton, you're keeping a close eye on Northampton Town. What can you inform us about how things have been going so far this season?
Yeah, things are looking on the up, Warren. Obviously, we started slowly, 2 1-goal defeats in our opening 2 matches against Stevenage and Wigan. had many doubting their credentials. Northampton, they've been a bit of a boing club in the recent years. It's League One, League Two, up, down, up, down. But this season, I think there's plenty of promise and plenty of hope that we can avoid relegation. Things this time look different. Things look settled under John Brady. He's been there just over 2.5 years now, and he's got a group of players that he's been working with since his reign started. And since losing those opening 2 games, they've bounced back, taking 7 points from the last 3. And that includes a 1-0 win over Derby rivals Peterborough. Obviously, Posh, they're a team expected to be at the top end of the table. They've got a bit more money to spend than Northampton, but they managed only 1 shot on target. And that has been a sign of things to come. Cobblers built on that with another 1-0 win at Cheltenham last weekend. Cheltenham themselves only managed 2 shots on target, and it was a game that Northampton dominated from the start. They won the shot count 16-8, and they had 60% possession. And as everyone knows, this is kind of 2 divisions in one, League One. You've got the clubs at the top and the clubs at the bottom, and these are games that you have to be winning. And Northampton did it. They did it in dominant style. What we have noticed from John Brady, there's been a bit of change in tack. They're used to going direct, and they're quite a forward-thinking team, but now they're trying to play out from the back, which has had its issues, and there's been a few mistakes. But to take 7 points from the last 3 games under new circumstances, a new style, it's a really big positive. Last season, Sam Hoskins scored 22 goals in League Two, and many had it down as a fluke, but he's hit the ground running in League One, 3 goals in 5 games. And he's just penned a new 3-year deal, which shows Northampton they're not around to sell their star players. They don't want to sell them. They want to build a group. They've been able to get back star loanees from last year, Kieran Bowie and Mark Leonard, and they've settled in effortlessly. And it's just a cohesive group that look like they're going to go from strength to strength. They were 7-4 for relegation at the start of the season, but now they're out to 11-4, and I think they will have enough to secure survival. Although a new attacking player to take the goal scoring burden from Hoskins would be preferred.
Yeah, it looks
One thing I would say as well is punters should just watch out for late drama, because at home to Wickham this week, there's been 10 goals in Northampton's 5 games this season, and 8 of those have come after the 70th minute. So I wouldn't be leaving early.
I was going to say there, Aaron, you mentioned there before about teams yo-yoing between sort of League One and League Two, and it seems like Northampton have got plans in place, and set their stall out to say, right, okay, we need to stay in this division this season, and a sensible way of doing it, rather than maybe some of the teams that get promoted and think straight away, okay, right, we should be looking at the top half of the table.
Definitely, that's it. Obviously, there's been 3 promotions in 8 campaigns from League Two, so it does show that we are going up and we are going down. And normally we are selling our star players and relying on loanees, and they're hard to find these young players because they're raw, and sticking them into men's football, having played under 21 football in the Premier League, it's completely different. But as I said, Northampton, they've managed to give a lot of their players 2- and 3-year deals in recent times, and those players are staying. So I think it's a settled group, and they're going forward under Brady, and I'm not sure they'll suffer relegation this season.
Well, I certainly want to watch Northampton this season. Let's have a look ahead to the weekend action then. I know that Aaron's got 2 tips to put up for the EFL this weekend. What's your first, Aaron?
The first one is Barnsley to win at Cheltenham. Obviously, I mentioned Northampton's dominant performance against Cheltenham, and Barnsley, unlike Northampton, are probably going to be challenging for promotion up there. So this is a game they should be winning. The pressure is really on Cheltenham boss Wade Elliott. They've got no goal in 5 and only 1 point to show for their efforts so far. And obviously last season, they lost leading scorer Alfie May, who went to Cheltenham, and they've been unable to replace him. There's no source of goals, and they've managed only 12 shots on target across their opening 5 games. Barnsley, meanwhile, have scored 11 goals, and they have plenty of attacking options at their disposal. They had gone 3 games without a win until last weekend's 2-0 win at Wigan, but that will put them back on track, and I expect them to go and follow up at Wadham Road. They're 19-20. I think that's a fair price.
I would tend to agree with you. Barnsley then are the first tip for this weekend's EFL action. Who's the second?
And the second is Mansfield at home to Bradford. Sorry, these are 2 of League Two's big underachievers. They're always expected to challenge for the title. They haven't been able to do so in recent years. But the Stags, they've made a really, really strong start to the season. They're unbeaten in all competitions. That's 7 games. And obviously in midweek they won at Sheffield Wednesday in the EFL Cup on penalties. And that was a really, really strong Sheffield Wednesday side, featuring the likes of Barry Bannon and Josh Windass. So that's a good win there. Nigel Clough's side, they've actually racked up 117 shots across their 5 league games. That's 24 more than any other team. So they are creating a lot of chances. In last weekend's 3-2 win at home to Stockport, another team who are expected to challenge for the title this season, they won the shot count 28-10 and had 11 corners. So that's really impressive when you consider how big Stockport are in this division. In their other league game, home league game, they beat Morecambe 3-0 at home. So I expect them to beat Bradford, who are winless in 3 away games this season. That includes defeats to 0 at Crawley and Morecambe, and obviously a 1-1 draw at Stockport.
Yeah, Nigel Clough against Mark Hughes. That would have been a Premier League fixture a few years back when they were both players, but certainly a big game for both Mansfield and Bradford this weekend. So just before we let you go, Aaron, just to recap on your 2 tips then for the EFL this weekend.
So Barnsley to win at Cheltenham at 19-20, and Mansfield to win at home to Bradford at 10-11.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Well, thanks to Aaron for his roundup of the best EFL bets of the weekend. Mark, it's time now to have a look at some of your best bets aside from the outright markets, of course, over the weekend, the bet builders, the trebles and the naps. So we'll start off with a bet builder prop shop. What's your selection here?
Yeah, so we're going to go for, it's at Kenilworth Road on Friday night. West Ham to win against Luton. I think West Ham have started the season very well, got their 7 points. And actually, you look at the quality they've got in the final third, all of those players are playing well at the moment. So we're going for West Ham to win. We're going for Paquetá to have a shot on target, which he's had in all 3 matches so far. It looks like he's on pens as well. So, if they do get a penalty, that would obviously be a good opportunity to have a shot on target. But he's also somebody that is, just a quality player. He was linked with Man City, wasn't he, for, much of the summer. He's not going there for well-documented reasons. But for the moment, I think that's West Ham's gain. And then I'm going to go for over 10 corners to round off the bet builder that comes in at about 9-2. West Ham have been giving away a lot of corners this season. Now, they have been playing against high-quality opposition, so that might explain it to some extent. Luton have actually fared very well in the corner market, despite 2 hard games against Brighton and Chelsea. And I suppose the way that they played, very direct. They've looked at put a lot of crosses in, and that does just sort of lend itself to corners potentially. So yeah, West Ham to win. I've got a Paquetá shot on target, and then over 10 corners that comes in at 9-2, and then just a couple of other sort of on the props that I'm looking at for this weekend. Chilwell to have a shot on target at 7-4. He's had 4 shots so far, getting forward a lot.
Definitely should have scored last week, Mark, as well. Yeah,
he should have. Yeah, I don't think he'll be passing in that situation in future. No. And if you remember, he had the goal disallowed against Liverpool as well. It was a really tight call. He's playing. I don't even think it is as a left. It's sort of left wing back, but almost left midfield at the moment, because Colwell's playing, very much in the left back slot. So, just like most modern teams now, you're different in and out of possession. But in possession, Chilwell is playing really high up. So I even looked at him 18-1 as well for the first goal. Might be of interest, but probably just a shot on target 7-4 might be the way to go. And then Pedro Porro's around about 2-1 for a shot on target. Another one, he's playing right back nominally for Tottenham, but when they get the ball, he's playing, in an advanced midfield position. Postecoglou's spoken about, it's not about positions, it's about finding space. He's somebody that is not afraid to have a shot, picked up a few goals last season. He's had 4 shots in 2 games so far for Spurs, and he was rested against Fulham. So expecting him to come back in. Yeah, 2-1 for a shot on target. I thought he might be somebody that, well worth having on the radar for a game away at Burnley, where you would imagine Tottenham would have enough attempts on target to make this a lively runner.
Let's move on to the treble suggestion now. And Mark had a winning treble last time he was on. Can we keep that winning run going this time round? What's your selection here, Mark?
Well, let's hope so. So I'm going for Man City to win and under 4.5 goals in the game against Fulham. If you have a look at sort of Fulham's record last season against the big teams away from home, they lost to all of the top 5, but there were under 3.5 goals in all of those matches. So they did keep it tight. They were very competitive. I want to play it slightly safer with the 4.5, because you know what City can be like if they got on a roll. But I don't think Man City have hit absolute sort of flying form have they so far. You look at their games, 1-3-0 against Burnley. They had the sort of draw in 90 minutes against Sevilla. 1-0, grind it out against Newcastle, and then left it late to beat Sheffield United as well. So yeah, Man City to win and under 4.5 goals. I'm going for Napoli to beat Lazio. Lazio have been really poor so far in their defeats to Genoa and Lecce this season. And then finally, Atletico Madrid to beat Sevilla. Atletico smashed Rayo on Monday, 7-0. I think the case could be made that they were actually, by the end of last season, they were the best team in Spain. They were playing really good football. Sevilla are not in a good way, cash-strapped at the moment. So, yeah, Man City to beat Fulham under 4.5 goals, Napoli to beat Lazio, and Atletico Madrid to beat Sevilla.
Atletico to win 7-0, unheard of. Normally 1-0, sit back on that, more than happy. But yeah, that shows you the form they're in at the moment. Let's have a look at Mark's naps then in terms of this weekend. Which team is your best bet of the week, Mark?
I've mentioned them a couple of times already. So, I mean, if they don't do this, then it's going to sort of ruin a few bets. But it's Man City to beat Fulham and under 4.5 goals. Even if Paulinho were to be sold, I'd still fancy this one.
Okay, that's Mark's suggestions for you across the Premier League and Europe this weekend. It's don't forget, of course, to like, subscribe and comment. And we'll be back again next week for another episode of Mark Langdon's Bets Club. And also, of course, as well as enjoying your football, remember to gamble responsibly. Thanks for joining us this week on Mark Langdon's Bets Club.